Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Ali with the AI Enthusiast, and we will start our lecture 5 of Python, but the Python tutorial series that we have. And in this lecture, we're going to be covering if-else logic, which is arguably probably the most important thing, aside from being able to store data, like having a variable. If-else logic is so important and central to programming computers. I would say it's easily in the top three things that are to be learned in programming, and you'll see how simple it is actually. So we're going to go back to the drawing board again. I like to be very visual with how I teach things. So in the past, we talked about variables, right? We talked about inputs and then outputs. So we have our variables. This grid you can see here. This would be like the memory grid, and then inside of it we would have variables. So this could be variable A, and it has a value of 5. This could be variable B, it could have a value of 6. And then we talked about operators, and let's just say you have the plus operator. This is going to give you an 11, and maybe we store that value. We say C is equal to A plus B, and we put that in another memory cell right here. So that's 11 right there. So we got 3 memory cells here, and this is the computer's memory. We talked about operators, all sorts of operators. We talked about memory. We talked about variables. So the next thing is, guys, what if you want your computer to do something based off of some sort of condition? So maybe, just maybe, if I have a good grade, I can say good job, and then maybe a student. So we'll take an example, right? Like let's say we have the grade for a student, and the software is going to say, based off of their grade, they're going to say, "Oh, good job," or "Hey, you did a great job, but maybe you can improve a little bit more." So something like that, right? And that's basically conditional logic. It's an if-else type of scenario. So let's say we have the grade. We'll have another variable here. We'll call it grade. And in this box, let's say the grade is a 95. So in Python, we'll just say 95 right here. This is going back to the previous lectures, but this is a 95. And then based off of this 95, we're going to feed this value of grade, and we're going to check if grade is greater than 90, greater than or equal to. And if it is, if that's a yes, then we can say, good job. And if it isn't, we can say, still a good job. Okay? Well, we could say maybe this is a great job. We could say something like that. So you can see your program has to make a decision. This is your decision node. And if it's a true statement, whatever your condition is, if it's a true condition, then it's gonna, if the value is true, or it's yes, this is true, then you can say one thing, and then otherwise you can say another thing. Essentially, this is just some more logic you've written, some code you've written. You could have the computer do anything. So now that we've gone over that, okay. We can jump into the actual coding side of it. So again here, guys, before we move on, please go ahead and copy this particular Google Colab sheet that I have, and the link is in the description of this video. Please copy it, and please follow along as we go along here, because remember, the only way you're going to get better with programming in particular, and with a lot of things in life, you have to put it into practice, and you have to get engaged with it. So this right here is essentially your way to stay engaged, to go through some examples, and at the very end, we have practice questions with the answers, which is awesome. So let's go ahead and start from the top. So if-else logic is also considered or called conditional logic, as you can see here. And it's a fundamental concept that in programming, as we already mentioned. So when do we use conditional logic? It's going to be used whenever you have some information and you want to make a decision based off of that information, and do certain things based off of that information. So for example, you can check whether or not a user prefers Spanish before showing them your website in Spanish. And that would be like conditional logic. So over here, as you can see, we actually have the basic syntax of putting this into Python. We have the if condition, and then if you have the if keyword essentially, and then you have the else keyword, and then you put your condition, and then you have a colon, and then if that condition evaluates to true, anything inside of the if, in the side of this bracket, in this section, is going to be executed. Otherwise, if this condition was false, anything in this section is going to be executed. And as you can see, every line of code inside the if block is going to be indented over. And then likewise for else, it's going to be indented over. So it's if this condition, execute this code, else execute this code. And let's take a look at an example. As you can see here, you have age equals 10, and now we're checking if age is greater than or equal to 20. If it is, then the code inside of here is going to execute. And as you can see, we're going to print you are at least 20 years old. I could do all sorts of other things. I could say A is equal to 6, and then I could print A. So it's going to execute all of these lines of code if this condition evaluates to true. Otherwise, it's going to execute the lines of code that are tabbed over under else. And then you would resume your normal code that doesn't belong inside your if-else logic. You just tab back in. So I could just say, print done. And so this done is going to print regardless of what happens, whether we execute this section or we execute this section. So yeah, I can just print that out, and you'll see that since age is not greater than or equal to 20, we're going to say you are younger than 20 years old. And then also done is going to get printed out. And then you can see also if I do 21, then it doesn't do this code. It only does the top 3 lines here. And it'll print at least 20 years old, and it'll also print the value 6, which is what's stored inside of A. So you can see this is an example of an if-else logic. And sometimes you'll run into scenarios where you have an if condition. Maybe you want to check for another condition. Right now, the way we see it, it's you have a condition, and then else, it's just anything that's not under this condition executes here. But you could have multiple checks essentially. So that's where we have elif. So elif stands for else if. It's short for else if, and it allows you to check for other things. So you'll have condition 1 here, and then you have a statement, else if, condition 2, statement, and then finally else. If this condition 1 or this condition 2, if they both evaluated to false, you have a default logic here that's executing inside of this else block. And so the standard format, it's if condition with a colon, and then elif condition with a colon, and you could have multiple elifs here, and then you have else, you have a statement there. You have any logic that executes under the else. All right, so let's take a look at this example. So num equals 10, and you'll see there are 3 conditions here. You have num is greater than 0, otherwise num is less than 0, and then otherwise the default condition, this would mean that num is not less than, right here, or greater than equal to 0. The only logic that would execute here is if num is equal to 0 itself. And so you can see number is positive, number is negative, number is 0. So if I do 10, you'll see positive, and then I'll try doing 0. You'll see that the number is 0. So you can see you can have multiple conditions here. And then finally, you can actually have multiple conditions within one check. So inside of this this code block, you see how num1 is 10, num2 is 20, and we're basically checking. We have a condition here. It's a large condition. It has more than one single condition inside of it. It's a joint condition, and you have num1 is greater than 0, and num2 is greater than 0. Both of these have to this statement has to evaluate to true in order for this block to run, this code to run. So is num1 greater than 0? Yes. Is num2 greater than 0? Yes. Therefore, and this keyword, it's saying that both these conditions have to be true. Therefore, it's going to do both numbers are positive. And there we go. I would refer back to logical operators and not to play around with those. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening and tuning in. This is pretty much it for if-else logic. And again, please practice. Please like and subscribe. It does help me understand which videos are popular. So yeah, take care, guys. Have a good one.